This is video about real unsolved police cases. Case number 1, the Whispering Pines Mystery. Whispering Pines, Colorado. In the small town of Whispering Pines, Colorado, a series of gruesome murders had the local police stumped. 4 people had been killed in a span of just 3 months, their bodies discovered with expressions of terror frozen on their faces. Each victim had been found near the edge of a dense, eerie forest, known to locals as the Hollow. Detective Laura Miller was called in to investigate. Her first lead came from a bizarre piece of evidence: a strange symbol carved into the tree next to each body. The symbol resembled an ancient runic pattern, though no one could identify its origin. As Laura dug deeper, she learned that the murders mirrored an unsolved case from decades ago, when a group of tourists had gone missing in the same area. Rumors about the forest being cursed circulated. Some believed that the forest was alive, a sentient entity that could control the minds of those who ventured too far into its depths. One night, as Laura ventured into the forest, she felt an unnatural coldness wrap around her. The trees seemed to move, their twisted limbs groaning and creaking as though alive. Then she heard it, a low whisper carried on the wind, barely audible but undeniably present. "Run!" Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shifted, and she stumbled, finding herself face to face with the same symbol carved into a tree. The air grew thick with shadows, and figures materialized from the darkness. Ghostly apparitions of the murdered victims reached out toward her, their faces twisted in pain. As one of them lunged at her, Laura felt herself frozen, unable to move. The whispering grew louder, almost deafening. The next morning, her body was found just outside the forest. Her report was incomplete, just a note: "The Hollow is alive." Case number 2, the vanishing of Beacon Hill. Beacon Hill, Massachusetts, in the historic district of Beacon Hill, Boston, a high-profile case rocked the local community. The famous historian and professor, Dr. William Forsythe, vanished without a trace in the dead of night. His wife reported hearing strange noises in the house before his disappearance: mysterious thumps, whispers in the walls, and objects shifting on their own. Detective Alex Carter was assigned to investigate the case. His first stop was Dr. Forsythe's study, a cluttered room filled with old maps, books, and artifacts. But among the piles of historical documents, Alex found something unsettling: a letter addressed to Dr. Forsythe, written in a cryptic, almost otherworldly script. It detailed an expedition Forsythe had undertaken years ago to an ancient burial site in Egypt, where he discovered an artifact: a black stone carved with symbols that matched the ones found in Whispering Pines. The letter warned that the stone had awakened something. Forsythe had become obsessed with it, his behavior growing increasingly erratic. He had traveled the world, seeking more artifacts tied to the same curse. The night Alex decided to visit Dr. Forsythe's house, things took a dark turn. As he explored the study, he felt the temperature drop suddenly, his breath coming out in visible clouds. The walls seemed to pulse, and faint whispers could be heard in the air, like voices speaking in a language he couldn't understand. Alex was drawn to a hidden compartment beneath the desk where he found the black stone. The moment he touched it, a vision overtook him, a vision of Dr. Forsythe standing before an ancient tomb, his face filled with terror as shadowy figures closed in around him. The next morning, Alex was found in the same study, eyes wide open, in fear. His report ended abruptly with just one sentence: "It's in the walls." Case number 3, the Silent Scream. Blackwater, Louisiana. In the swamps of Blackwater, Louisiana, An entire family disappeared overnight. The Dupree family, father, mother, and 2 children, had lived in a remote house near the swamp for years, seemingly cut off from the rest of the town. But one morning their house was found empty. The doors were locked from the inside, the windows unbroken, and no signs of a struggle. The only thing left behind was a trail of muddy footprints leading toward the swamp. Detective Ethan Hayes was called to investigate. He spoke with the neighbors, who all claimed they had heard strange noises coming from the Dupree house the night before. Screams, dragging sounds, and an eerie chanting. But when they went to check, everything seemed normal. Ethan ventured into the swamp, following the muddy trail. As he reached the heart of the swamp, he noticed something disturbing. Piles of bones, old and new, scattered along the ground. Then, he stumbled upon an old wooden shrine, covered in strange symbols. At the center of the shrine, an empty cage lay rusted and decaying. The air was thick with humidity, but there was an overwhelming, suffocating silence. As Ethan approached the shrine, a voice whispered in his ear, "Help them." Suddenly, the ground shifted and the swamp seemed to come alive. Figures emerged from the muck, ghostly, skeletal forms, their eyes hollow and pleading. The Dupree family appeared among them, their faces frozen in agony, mouths open in a silent scream. They reached out, their hands like claws, begging for release. The last thing Ethan saw before the shadows consumed him was the reflection of his own face in the water, his eyes wide with terror, unable to scream. Detective Laura Miller, Alex, Carter, and Ethan Hayes never returned to their cities. Their cases were closed, their reports filed away, but their disappearances remained unsolved. Months later, a lone officer working late in the precinct stumbled upon a set of old case files. 3 completely unrelated investigations tied by one unshakable truth: the symbol. It had appeared in all 3 cases: the strange runic mark carved into trees in Whispering Pines, the cryptic letter in Dr. Forsyth's study in Beacon Hill, and the bones scattered across the shrine in Blackwater. A chilling realization dawned upon the officer. These weren't isolated cases. They were connected by something older, darker, something that existed between the cracks of reality, feeding on fear and drawing in those who dared to investigate. The officer closed the files, his hand trembling. The last page read simply, "You are not alone." And the haunting whispers followed him all the way home. The unsolved files remain, sitting forgotten in police archives. But sometimes, late at night, officers working alone hear faint whispers echoing through the halls. And if you listen closely, you might hear one phrase, repeated, "Help us find the source."